Hello, everyone who is joining us today. We'll start this session in about 4 minutes. Meanwhile, feel free to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. Also, please confirm that you can hear me well. Hello, Roman. Good to see you. Where are you joining us from? Please use the chat to your right freely. You can introduce yourself and let us know where you're located, where you're joining us from. Perfect. Can you please confirm in the chat that you can hear me clearly? Perfect. Good to hear. That's perfect. So we will start the session, as I said, in several minutes. We'll wait a bit until everybody has logged in into the session. So we are looking at a very interesting webinar today with our partners, UPRI. Always we had great webinars together, so I'm sure this one will not be different. So are you joining us for the first time, or have you been to one of our sessions before? Have you been to more sessions with us in UPRI before? Okay, so first time. So I'm sure you will enjoy the session and learn quite a lot today, Ahmed. Anyone else join us for maybe second time? So we had quite a lot of wonderful webinars this year about temperature compliance and temperature mapping. It was a series of great webinars. Right, great. So I see that we have several people who are joining us for the second time. So good to see. Great. So it's 4 o'clock here in Central Europe. I will give another minute for the people who are joining us just on time. And then I will start the quick introduction. So we'll jump right into the session. Perfect. Okay, so let me gradually start the introduction to the session while more people join us. So with this slide, I want to officially say hello and welcome you to today's webinar hosted by Qualistory. My name is Jan, and I will be your main moderator for this session with our partner UPRI. And today's discussion explores the topic of guidelines for automating your temperature compliance and the pitfalls that you should avoid. And the purpose of this webinar is to help you gain a more deep understanding of automation in temperature monitoring and the latest technology advancements. And please know that this session is being recorded, and you will get the recording after some time emailed to you by our event partner, UPRI. And as I mentioned, multiple times today. Our webinar partner is UPRI, and UPRI specializes in leading automated temperature compliance solutions and is based in Denmark. And newly they have opened a new office in the USA, so I want to congratulate them on that. And we had throughout those couple of years, very great relationships with UPRI, partnering with them with a series of amazing webinars on temperature mapping. And we had external speakers and, of course, internal speakers who are high expertise within UPRI itself. And all the sessions are highly educational, very interesting. So it was a great journey. And this session won't be some other thing than that. So you should know that this webinar will be up to 60 minutes, and it will have a Q&A session at the end. It also includes a certificate of attendance, which will be emailed to you within several working days. Please be aware that you should stay until the end of the lecture to receive the certificate. And please be patient, as it will take some time. We will check in the system for and confirm that you have attended the lecture, and you'll get the certificate, as I mentioned, within several working days, not directly after the webinar. And now I'm eager to introduce to you the speakers at today's webinar, Adam Hartman Krakow and Jakub Konradsen. Here are they popping on screen. And some background. So Adam has a background in design and innovation engineering. He co-founded UPRI as part of a Danish Technical University project, and the result was an innovative method to maintain temperature monitoring that formed the basis of the automated temperature compliance solutions that UPRI offers today. And today, Adam's role is heading the UPRI's global growth strategies and supporting product development. And our second speaker is Jakub Konradsen. He has a background in electrical engineering and has worked with quality and validation for his entire work life. Jakub has broad experience within the thermal validation and calibration field, emphasizing temperature validation of everything from temperature controlled units to large scale warehouses and transport vehicles. And Jakub is very passionate about finding solutions that balance regulatory requirements with cost-effective and pragmatic approach and risk-based solutions. So I'm confident that you will learn much from Adam and Jakub today. So happy learning, and guys, take it from here.
Thank you very much, Jan, and hi everybody out there. It's so nice to see so many people for this event. I'm just gonna mix in this. And one thing that we was excited about today, Jakub and I, is that it's a slightly different topic that we are presenting for you today. Normally we would be talking about some very specific parts about the mapping and validations, which are obviously equally very interesting. But what we are going to do today is that we're going to shift the focus up a bit to kind of like the upper level of this, which we call temperature compliance as a whole. And within that, validation and mapping is part of that. So that's why we want to present this kind of like the automated guidelines or automating your temperature compliance guidelines. Now we did present Jakub and me, but you know, our story just go way back. And I constantly kind of promote, or at least share with you guys out there, that you know, we started up this company 10 years ago, and we had a great idea from a university experience that we have had traveling around, particularly in Africa, trying to set up super smart, inventive temperature compliance solutions. And that kind of led us to do this for companies like the ones that you are representing, and also primarily companies in the western part of the world today. But Jakob and me, we've been working together on these concepts and trying to build a company around it. And like Jan said, like today we are expanding quite fastly. And then just to dive into it, one of the handouts that you will find in this program, it's located on your right. It's called handouts, and you will find the guides or the 6 strategies to spend way less time on temperature compliance. It's some of the same topics that we're going to talk about today, but it's slightly more nuanced what we're going to focus on today. So that means that the agenda that we have on for now is that we'll dive directly into the temperature compliance process and then move forward into the pitfalls and how to basically cover those pitfalls with what we have. During the presentation, don't hesitate in writing your questions or ideas or whatever you think in the chat. It's just on the right also. We'll also promote a couple of polls, and so be ready for that. Great. The temperature compliance process.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Adam. In today's talk, we'll try to center our talk around the standard processes that are involved in keeping a temperature-controlled unit in thermal compliance. And as you'll see on the screen, the lifetime or the life cycle of a temperature-controlled unit involves a lot of different processes, starting from validating the equipment until handling deviations, remappings, review of data, audits, and so forth. So we'll try to go through these different steps and give our view on how do we view some of the automation upsides there are, but also what are some of the pitfalls that could be that you could fall into when operating systems that are not automized. So I'll take a step into it here. First of all, it's very important for us to sort of identify this baseline of how is it done today. There are a lot of different things we see with our customers out there, how they deal with all these different parts as part of the life cycle of a temperature-controlled unit. First of all, we often see that calibrations are done at an external company, and that involves a series of, I would say, pitfalls in terms of having an optimal operational situation in your company. We also see that we'll have sensor procured by one company and have them calibrated by another company and delivered by a distributor. So there's sort of a whole life cycle and many different parties involved in this process. We also see that even the software to analyze data or do trend analysis is provided by yet another company. So that's sort of the normal scenario we see in this purchasing circle. We often see that, and I hope you can all agree with me on that the quality is delivered by an internal team. But what we often also see is that if you have global organizations, you have a centralized quality unit that deals with this, and this also brings in operational inefficiencies, I would say. Furthermore, validations, I think we see almost a 50-50 split between validations being performed within the company or from a third-party vendor. I think also with the onset of coronavirus, we started to see an increase in insourcing it. But from our perspective right now, we see a lot of companies outsourcing this activity in order to save time, and often we find that it's cheaper to outsource this capability to an outside party. Some of the last points, we often also see operating sensor units is in departments. Something that we want to touch base on today as well is that we see that individual departments, be it lab, storage units or storage departments, labs, so forth, they handle temperature operation and temperature compliance independently. Something that we'll definitely also talk today about a bit about how can you automate and streamline that process, specifically also in large organizations. We also see that external audits are handled by the quality department and sort of prepared together with the operational teams. And what we want to emphasize here is often that we see a misconnect between the internal quality units and the operational teams, in which there can be some miscommunication or some pitfalls at least. So definitely today we will touch beta, but this was just sort of getting on baseline with everyone in how we see it, and we're really well aware that there are different situations in different companies, of course.
And that's kind of what we want to stress with this topic, is that now we go across all these kind of silos where you would normally see what we define as temperature compliance.
Yeah,
you might call it something else out there, but to us, it's just a word that kind of like encompasses the total of all these different activities that are being done around temperature monitoring, validation, ongoing calibration, validation, mapping, so on and so forth, audits. If you look at that like singular fridge or freezer, this is all the life cycle steps that this particular element goes through, or warehouse. This is all the steps that it goes through. And what we just see, like Jakob says, it's so many hands that are actually doing it. And that means many hands, many types of units, many potential pitfalls.
Absolutely.
That's the result of it. Yeah. And there's also good reasons why it is like that today, but it's just to maybe, like, we really want to try to stress and need at least to just look at it slightly different. And this is also obviously our passion, is to look at this like this.
Absolutely.
So this is where we come
from. I think also our approach also has a basis in more of sort of a holistic way of approaching temperature compliance. So I hope we can go through many of these topics today and get some interesting questions at least. Yeah.
Right. So the pitfalls.
Yes, absolutely. So you should see through this this presentation that you have a small graphic in the lower hand corner that should sort of step us through sort of the chronological order of things to happen. The first step on our journey, we've chosen the validation of equipment. One of the things we see in terms of optimizing this process is that there's a lack of an organizational-wide strategy or ownership of the validation process. That means that often you will have singular units, or even in smaller organizations, you'll have singular labs performing validation in an incoherent way. And one of the automation solutions to that, that we identify at least, is that rather than making individual template or individual protocols and individual strategies, is to have an organizational-wide strategy and having template protocols for what the most common used equipment is. One of these things that we see have greatly increased in efficiency for large organizations is having a validation strategy and a template protocol for a fridge, for a freezer, for a ULT, for a warehouse. This greatly eliminates some of the errors found during external audits, as an example, but having that company-wide strategy is something that's often missing, and it's one of the pitfalls we see a lot, having to reinvent the wheel every single time a unit is validated.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily that everybody wants to reinvent the wheel, but if you don't know what the best practice or the benchmark is, then you would obviously just decide on some peculiar way to do it that you find reasonable when you are in the situation. And that's kind of what you would like to avoid, right? That just having this streamlined process, it would just make it so much easier going forth, but also back in time to know what did we actually do here. So one of our best findings, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring best to front. Yeah. So another pitfall we see is that time used on exporting data from validation of equipment can take rather long time, and luckily there's sort of a real simple solution to that, is that we would often encourage companies to use a wireless system that has sort of a company-wide software related to it, but most important that it's a wireless system. Real-time data really is one of the key improvements that one can do in terms of optimizing the whole validation process. I think some of the cases we see where USB loggers are being used as an example, where you'd have 1 week or 2 week long studies, which you then export the data from, and you notice that it's really not in compliance, and that puts the whole project back 2 weeks. So having wireless data loggers is as far as I see it in today's market, a bare minimum.
And now we say wireless data. Obviously, they could be wired also, because then you would kind of have the access to the data immediately. And it's just that it has kind of a chain effect when you get data fast.
Yeah, and I think also during validation of equipment, often the cost of introducing wired systems can sort of outrun the wired systems. But yeah, and generally a better terminology would be real-time data loggers.
But in reality, like wireless data loggers, they're so efficient, both in terms of cost, but also like battery power and runtime and everything like that. So today it doesn't really make sense to really focus too much on wired data loggers.
I think the time has sort of, in my perspective, run away from wired system, at least in some senses. I mean, when you're talking warehouses, it's really not relevant to talk about wired sensors anymore, and specifically doing validations when it's put up hundreds of loggers. That's
sure. That's a no-go for sure.
So for the moving forward a bit here. So having sort of live data view is one of the things we touched base with just previously. Really having a live data view in order to minimize risk in terms of being able to solve issues before they become into deviations. That's really one of the things that I think we see a lot of legislators and auditors starting to emphasize, that real time or something that resembles real time, or at least a fast response, is something that's expected by auditors, because having week-old data is not really sufficient in terms of being able to respond. It doesn't drive efficient operation. It doesn't drive efficient organizations. So having a real-time data view really minimizes time and risk in terms of not planning for failure, but planning to prevent failure. I think that's one of the really large points.
And in relation to validation of equipment, I assume it's also when you are testing, to just capture those mistaken or errors during a test that you would normally, if you didn't have like real time, you would wait until tomorrow when the test is done and realize after 5 minutes that there was a fault that you could just have fastly fixed, and then
I think in terms of time used on validation of equipment, real-time data should be the number one priority, because getting that constant feedback when you're validating something, and it just scales with size. I think for a large warehouse with 200, 300, 400 sensors, it really scales in terms of amount of time that you minimize on using it, because you get an instant feedback on whether something is within acceptable ranges or it is not. So in terms of being able to automate the processes, real-time data, and then I would still say that wireless data log is one of the major upsides.
Cool. I'm just gonna, Jakob, before you shift the slide out there, I'm just gonna pull a poll for you guys so you can answer while we talk. Maybe it's because it's a new kind of topic for us to talk about. So maybe let's have a look how you answered this one. So the poll is there, and you should see it on your screen.
Yeah, so we'd really love to get your insight into what is the largest task in terms of temperature compliance. We've seen hundreds of our customers go through this, but would love to see whether you kind of see the same things as we do.
Yeah, and if they're not relevant for you, then drop a message in the chat, and then we'll all be smarter. Cool.
Absolutely. So while we're waiting for the answers to go in here, I think we'll jump to the next point here.
And I'm apparently not the best at tech today, because I constantly turn this one off.
Yeah.
There you go, Jakob.
Yes. So in terms of the next step, which would be after validation, going to, in terms of thermal compliance, going to ongoing monitoring. First of all, one of the pitfalls we see is that ongoing data export is manual. I would say in most cases, this is generally something that we see less and less of. There are very few systems left that we replace where the alternative was any sort of manual data export, but we still see it. And that's why we brought it up here when we discussed it. This is really a major time. Having real-time data transfer, now I know it's the same as in the validation, but having it in real time in terms of being able to get the data out of the loggers, that's a huge point. We've seen several cases with customers having full-time positions only set for exporting data. This next one has less to do with optimizing efficiency and cost, and has more to do with avoiding non-conformities, I would say. One of the things we see with some systems or some configurations of systems is that the responsibilities are not clearly defined. And what we mean by that is, are there any sort of clear indication, or not any sort of, but is there a clear indication of who has the responsibility for every single unit and what should they do? And sometimes with a misconfiguration of a system or simply a system that does not really allow it, actions can fall between chairs. So you might get deviations of temperature that no one is really set up for receiving, or the people who are supposed to be set up for receiving don't have the right configuration. So the thing to do is basically to have a system that allows for giving out responsibilities, giving out actions to people so that someone knows what to do in terms of a temperature non-compliance. This is also one of the things we'll get back to in terms of being prepared for an audit. We often see customers not having clearly defined who has the responsibility for the thermal compliance of XYZ unit. This is really something that I think should be emphasized. I think before what is actually when I'm sorry, but this is something that ought to be well described in SOPs, right? And it's a really good question. I think from our viewpoint, we often see very clearly defined SOPs describing that a responsibility should be given, but I would say not in a large amount of cases, but the ones we see that are most predominant, there hasn't been a qualification or an insurance that responsibility has been given in a system.
The link is that it kind of, you can have it in SOP, but now you have some data, you have a deviation or alarm, you have something going on. Now you attach the responsibility to that.
Who has this? I often find the asset test or sort of the final test to be create an alarm at 11 o'clock in the evening on a Friday. Does someone respond? And what happens on from there? It should be, first of all, it should be clearly viewable who has the responsibility, but it should also be tested. And the system should allow for that clear transparency in the system. That's one of the pitfalls. As I said before, the pitfall is either not having a system where you can divide that responsibility, and the second one is having a system that does that, but not having it configured correctly. So that someone acts 11 o'clock on a Friday. That's sort of the statistically most inconvenient time of the week.
Sure.
I think we should maybe take a look at the poll here. So there's a really widespread time used on. I think the most predominant ones are calibration of loggers, handling of alarms, and validation of temperature units. And that seems to fit nicely with the, I think, what we view out there as well. There's some more responses coming in here, and this is definitely one of the things that we'll touch base with moving on here.
Nice. Okay, so it seems to me that this topic is kind of like because we were really curious about is it really relevant for you guys out there? Because typically we would assume that the expertise that you have is like specified in validation or the operations or or something else in your company. But is temperature compliance actually something that you consider as a whole? You can answer that in the chat, and then we can discuss it later.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, let me get this out of the way.
Yes.
Sarah?
So moving on a bit from our discussion of the ongoing monitoring. So one of the things, and this correlates closely to what we've just discussed, is we see a tendency that thermal compliance as a concept, and I would say also a culture, tends to rely on a central quality unit. And I think a major pitfall is to believe that a central quality unit or the quality team, whatever you call it, has the best feeling for what goes on an operational level. So I would say having operator involvement is really, really key. And I think the solution that we've kind of find out during our discussion is basically that having a user-friendly system is actually truly important for not so much automation, but basically in order for thermal compliance to be adapted into the quality culture of a broader, from a broader company perspective.
Yeah, like the willingness to actually do what you're supposed
exactly.
to. That is kind of as easy as possible.
Absolutely, and then having a system that's user-friendly, which allows you to handle deviations directly in the system, or at least closely related, has all that functionality and is user-friendly, and having the possibility to access support is one of the things that we see as sort of a major impact on general quality. So that's definitely one of the things that we see having an impact on the amount of non-conformities. So moving on, now there was also one of part handling temperature alarms, handling deviations. So one of the things that we often see is that reacting on and managing deviations is very time consuming. And one of the things that we see being the predominant reason why it is so hard, talking purely about thermal compliance, is that there's sort of a lag between the data and the non-compliance and sort of the root cause. So having a system that closely couples the data and the handling is a must in order to be able to automate that. Of course, there has to be human involvement, so I wouldn't say the terminology of automation fits entirely, but to greatly increase the efficiency of that, having a system that couples those two together in one system is definitely a goal.
Then it's super relevant to Adamakuri Rema. You write that the handling of alarms is one of the most time-consuming things in temperature compliance, right?
I'd love to hear your feedback as well, but the thing we often see is that it's because gathering data from one system, having a CAPA system in another system, and having whatever other data you need, operational data from that date, can sort of be a rather intricate and time-consuming process.
Also because it's typically two different systems.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and obviously we know that everybody has like their own handwritten stuff going on here and there, but that's just a really big issue to go back in time and see, when that audit appears, what was actually going on here. And I assume that's why it's time-consuming to handle alarms.
Yeah.
Also, at least.
Also, yeah. So another pitfall we see is that having a lack of overview of your deviations in terms of thermal compliance can mean that you can't clearly define any tendencies. And I would say a system that allows for easy overview should be one of the requirements when requiring a system, because it allows you to much faster spot any bad tendencies. I will allow you to spot any reoccurring deviations. So having one system that allows you to have a much better overview and allows you to sample all of those deviations in one place is one of the key factors as well in terms of automating your deviation management.
Yeah, and I really do believe that, at least this is what we see out there, is that like a lot of the deviations, or at least the alerts that you get, whether they're being escalated to deviations or not, they're typically kind of in the layer of like gray zone stuff. It's typically that machine over there reacting like this when everything is like that. And getting that overview that you just spent so much time on that single machine or that single event is so important to kind of sort out, to get that away so you don't have to spend time on it. And that could be many different ways to do that. Change your settings or your permitted error, basically. Something like that. But it's like getting that overview makes you decide on things like that easier.
Absolutely. And I think that transitions us very well to the last point here, is that providing data from deviations and documentation together it's such a time saver. Being able to have one system that can handle the information from the alarm, any sort of deviation management, the data, and the calibration certificate all in one place is really a cost-effective driver, an effectiveness driver in this, because those are all the elements that you need in order to handle an alarm or a deviation effectively. Has the unit, has the sensor been calibrated? What was done during the alarm? How was the alarm set up? Which acceptable ranges did occur? And what was the measured data? All those are things you need. So having all those in one place is a truly one of the things that drives effectiveness. And we sometimes see having calibrations in one place, data in another place, and deviation management in one place. And we see that bringing those together in one system truly drives efficiency. Not to say that there are not other effective ways to do it, but this would be on my personal top list in terms of improving any sort of optimization or automation of this, for sure.
When we realized this specific thing in UPRI, the result of it was that we developed an exporting feature that could kind of take all this information that Jakob just said into one PDF file, because that was kind of like, that was what you needed in your work as a quality professional, just to get that all out at once, because that would be able to bring it to an audit or to bring it as part of a deviation. So yeah, that's really some of that's why we came up with this.
Yeah. Absolutely. So calibration as well, of course, that's a huge part of.
Should we do a poll again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have one more.
Okay.
So we'd love to ask you what it is your goal is in terms of automating your temperature compliance. What is it you're hoping to improve? Sorry, not approve. I'm sure you do that on a daily basis. But what is it? What's driving you?
What's motivating you? Yeah. What is really, because we are motivated by this because we can see that there's a mega big impact in companies that we can, in pharma companies particularly, with actually focusing on temperature compliance as a core. Maybe this is kind of in the area, but maybe you guys have another thought to it, and then just elaborate in the chat. We will come back to this in a moment. Okay, Jakob, back to you.
So, of course, you can't talk about thermal compliance without talking about calibration. I would say the major issue we see, both in terms of using time and resources, but also sightings, not sightings per se, but at least observations from regulatory bodies, is having or not having clear calibration requirements. I cannot stress this enough. Having, and this goes for small and large companies, having a very clear set of requirements for how to calibrate for different units. We're talking accuracy of probes, we're talking maximum permissible errors, and we're talking about calibration intervals and calibration points. So what we often see in large organizations is that the requirements tend to be spread out or have non-coherence. There's sort of a difference in different departments. And that's one of the things where it can be very hard to rationalize both to customers or auditors or regulatory bodies why are there different requirements? The assessment should be the same, so why are the calibration requirements not the same? So the first thing to think about is basically, first of all, streamline the calibration types. We'd often do this in a quality assurance department, but also disperse or distribute those requirements across organization and across departments so that it's all aligned. It will also greatly increase the efficiency of being able to revise calibration certificates because you know what you're looking for, you know what the requirements should be. And it also reduces cost in terms of getting calibrations that are actually non-compliant to where you actually use it.
And it's just like the cost-saving thing, imagine just streamlining a thing like this that doesn't really have any negative quality effect, but it has in here, it's kind of like almost the cost of running our calibration lab with specific calibration point compared to some predefined points. It's kind of like half price. So it's really something that you should consider with your own calibration vendors out there, is that it's super big impact on cost saving you can do here.
Absolutely, yeah. And also due to the fact that often calibration providers will have a large volume to calibrate in, so why not calibrate all of them in the same sitting?
And it's the same with with the validation topic that we had in the beginning here. I know there's some of you out there, you have equipment that just can't be handled specifically with a preset calibration point or preset validation protocol. For sure, you will always have around 20% of things like that you just can't handle in that kind of predefined manner. But the 80% that you can do, that's really, really worth the consideration of not customizing that, but making sure that it's streamlined.
Absolutely.
So that's where this comes from, basically.
Absolutely. Moving on, one of the things we often see as well in terms of being able to automate or at least streamline processes is that there's a loss of control in terms of where calibration certificates are. Have they been reviewed? Have they undergone correct storing so that we have a retention on these? And the thing that we would definitely always promote is to have a digital storage of those certificates, and also a way for them to be readily available where you have your temperature measurements as well, so that you're always ready doing an audit to provide both measurements and calibration certificates. And also there are a lot of cases in which it's nice to be able to review the calibration certificates in terms of the deviation, so that you can actually analyze and temperature non-compliance in a much more efficient way. Another thing that we often see is that calibration results, so the data we extract from our calibration certificates, which often also indicates the drift of equipment, is kept analog or kept in a non-digital way. And I think the major solution to that is being able to have clear expectations with a calibration provider, being able to sorry, we seem to have an issue with the voice here. I'll try to continue and have Adam work on the issue here. Is to have a calibration provider where you have clear expectations on how the equipment should be calibrated and adjusted, so that you always have a calibrated data logger to use. We often see issues with our customers getting equipment back that has not been adjusted, and where review of calibration certificate fails, and you actually have a non-compliant data logger or sensor performing measurements.
It might be a bit of a funny point to kind of pull in front of you guys, because I think this is the way it's normally done. Like that, you have a calibration provider and they're running a lab and they're testing your equipment, and then they send you back the equipment, and then you realize at arrival that, oh my God, it didn't actually go through. But if you can really try to rethink that kind of process, because you can save so much time. It might just be, 10%, maybe even less, 5% of all your calibrations, where you end up getting in return a device or an equipment that has not passed. But those 5%, I bet my butts off that they will take so much time to just like figure out, okay, then what to do now. And if you can then reverse the process, making the calibration provider make sure that they actually deliver an adjusted device that is ready to use. It might cost you a bit more, but imagine the time that you can save on it. I think it can really be worth it. And again, that's exactly how we do it. So that's why we can see it's really beneficial out there to just sell a device that always works. So really consider that with your own calibration providers.
Absolutely. So I think the last point here is that the calibration process can often be rather error prone and stretch out over a long time. And it kind of ties back into our previous points here, but what we suggest is often to have a provider of calibration that will allow you to have spare units or will simply swap out your sensors during the calibration process. Because having a system where you store information on logger and logger positions sort of in analog digital way can be sort of tedious when you have these frequent swap outs. So having a system that allows you to have either spare units or entirely new units every single time really optimizes that automation process for sure.
You can maybe drop some comments in the chat and kind of share how you actually like cover this calibration process. But the kind of the examples that we see is typically that it's done by you taking half of all your equipment, shipping it to a calibration provider, and then in the 2 weeks that you need to pass between calibrations, you'll just have to have like spare equipment to put in your units in the meantime. And that just means, you need to do a lot of work in order to prepare that. You need to do a lot of work to just make sure it's set up correctly when you arrive back, and you need to store all the calibration certificates and all that. You know the drill. Maybe if you have some good tips for the rest of people in this room, then share it in the chat. Because the way that we do it is basically just to swap the data logger and then digitally also swap the calibration certificate in the software, and that really makes it a completely different process. That it's just gonna take you an hour to replace 80 data loggers basically.
Yes.
But have a look at our website to check that process out basically.
Definitely. So
let's say, Jakob, before we move on, then let's just see the results of the chat. I'm just gonna lean in here and I'm gonna close the poll because then you can see it. I think so. In a moment. Show results. So now I show the results here. And
I think this fits very nicely with our assumption. Often what we see is that the manual tasks are by far the largest issue when dealing with temperature compliance. I think the perspective on long-term perspective in terms of temperature compliance is that systems are becoming more and more automated, and that's also really why we would love to have this input on what should you be cautious about. And it warms my heart that improving the quality is also part of the most important ones for automating, because surely time usage and mitigating errors or mitigating risk is one of the key factors we see out there.
Nice. Okay. Then I'm just gonna get back to the slides again, Jakob.
Yes. So another thing we see, another topic is in terms of ongoing review of data and tendency analysis. First of all, one of the really time-hungry processes can be to manually do data analysis and tendency analysis. It's very error-prone if you don't have the right statistical tools, and it takes up a lot of time. So having one system that does the data analysis and which allows you to review the documentation, also review and sign that you've performed the review, and performed the analysis and tendency analysis, is really one key factor in terms of being able to be efficient. Another thing is that review of data has to be sort of a recurring scheduled task. It has to be ongoing, and that could also lead to more time being used. So having a system where you can review and sign and report on your tendency analysis all in one system is really also one of the things, in my view, one should be looking for when finding a system. Just to say, I think we should never forget that tendency analysis is really a key factor in my view, at least in terms of having thermal compliance, showing that you've carefully reviewed data and that you have not started to see adverse effects or at least statistics that could point towards adverse effects is really one of the key factors, and also one thing we often get questions to, because how do you review data? Which statistical tools should I use? And there's really a large amount of energy being put into making systems that will allow this to be done automatically. So I think we could do a whole webinar on how to do trend analysis of data, but for surely that's one of the manual tasks that we often see being used time on. So for the dreaded audit, I think we should start with a baseline that having an audit and the topic, or whenever getting to an audit, you'd often want the auditor to lose interest in something rather quickly, because it's a nice overview. That's all the documentation is readily available, and you have everything under control. They tend to lose interest in that area specifically. So I think that should be our baseline target, at least. So when having an audit, one of the pitfalls often is that we see that document control is time consuming when you have it physically. That's really, it's astonishing to me that we keep on seeing systems where data is being stored on paper or physically somewhere. I mean, I really find it amazing that people can still do this. So of course, having a system where every digital information is in one place, and it's a one-click search to get that documentation out. Often what we see also auditors wanting is well, you've done your reporting on a monthly basis. I would love to see data tendencies going across 3 months. How fast could you get this? Could you get this fast enough to make the auditor lose interest, basically? I think that's one of the things you should be looking for, is a system where you can get the documentation out. It's under control, but you can get it out relatively fast.
You're saying a lot of things in one here, Jakob, because there are, and this is, I think this is super interesting. There's one part of this that is just like having physical stored documents to prepare for an audit is super time consuming. It's one thing. And that's a hassle, because everybody, like you can never really prepare for an audit because they appear like that. And then you have to prepare for it. You maybe have a couple of weeks, but you spend so much time on actually getting ready for it. Maybe also because your documents are stored physically. But another thing you say is that when you're in the audit, stuff happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I think it's one of the things that we started, I think, in recent years, thermal compliance has had the same expectations from auditors in terms of being able to produce on-the-spot data, as you have from production sites and LIMS systems and BMS systems, being able to provide data on the fly in order to prove that you can actually readily review data for non-conformities or for trend analysis. Being able to do that in front of the auditor to show that you have that level of control over your data, I think is very, very powerful, because I think we start to see auditors expecting you to be able to go through data in a way more intelligent way than having to go through paper records. The time of printing everything out and underlying all the hotspots and cold spots and deviations, I think from our viewpoint, that time has passed, luckily.
But it's super interesting that you kind of share. It's like it's almost a tactic, because when you have that audit, that you're able to just on the fly show control that, like, this is my temperature compliance. You can just have a look into it. It's right there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of different topics that I'm sure you and I could use hours on. But another key thing is being able to provide an overview of the responsibilities. This has more to do with, I think, your CAPA system, but what we see is who has the responsibility for corrections and who has the responsibility for the corrective actions. And this ties back to having a user-friendly system in order to have operator involvement. One of the things where we see a great benefit and the auditors loving is you have thought about the operator being capable of providing corrective action. You have allowed them to close the door because they have direct involvement. They have a system that they can view data in, so they will have a much better understanding of what to do. I think one of the examples we have is often if we go on site somewhere and show a temperature deviation, like a spike in temperature, the operator is much more likely to be able to explain what that is than the quality unit. They have a much tighter relationships with the actual processes that are going on. So having that overview of who does the corrections and who does the corrective actions, most likely by a QA unit, I think is very powerful. So having a system where you can clearly and transparently display which are the users and what are their responsibilities, who can view and who can comment.
Nice, Jakob. I'm just going to start the last poll, guys out there. So how much time do you actually spend?
You spend on temperature compliance. I'm really interested in this because we see a large spread, at least in our customers, how much time is used just for thermal compliance or temperature compliance.
Right, cool. I'll just let you head back to your presentation, Jakob.
Absolutely. So configuration control is something that we often also see as a pitfall when you actually automate your compliance process. Having multiple systems involved in thermal compliance can sometimes lead to loss of configuration control. So I would say that this is one of the ones with less priority, but surely having a system that provides an overview of the configuration and user access levels. We often see that companies who've been in operation for a lot of years have layers of systems that all affect the thermal compliance. And that can lead to a pitfall of a loss of that configuration control. So that's definitely something to be worried about as well. Another thing we see, I think this is a small note, but basically control of user access level and changes are often not properly controlled, specifically in digital systems. And I hope you all agree with me on this, that there's only one answer, and that's to have a 21 CFR Part 11 compliance system. That is the only way. It's a simple answer, I know, but that's often the only way in order to be truly transparent, or in order to be truly capable of documented which changes were made and when. So having a system that captures all the different changes and all the different user levels is really key, and it should really be a baseline for having any sort of automated thermal compliance system. So before we end, I think I would love to see the poll. This is a very fun distribution, almost evenly spread out here. So that corresponds really well to what we talked about before, that we have a large spread, at least with our customers, in terms of how much time is used. Of course, there are also different roles, responsibilities within organizations, but I'm glad to see that our theory at least held up. So I think for this last part, we have a few minutes left. Would love to hear some questions. So we'll try to dig into the different questions you asked in the chat.
Right.
So there's a really great question here from Christopher Kennedy. I don't know if you could switch the Q&A time slightly, but either way. So we'll just do like this. Yes. So asking, do auditors object to a digital copy of a physical certificate, or would they ask to see the physical or original? This is a very good question. First of all, I would say that your company's document control SOP would be the place to go. when looking at calibration certificates in general, it follows the ISO 17025 guideline, and in that there are actually no requirements on having either digital or physical copies. In terms of of today's theme of optimizing, I would say setting it up so that you receive your calibration certificate digitally would be the way to go. So avoiding having any paper originals. Today, it's most providers provide a digital signature on in compliance with 21 CFR Part 11 on calibration certificates, which it's possible to verify. Having a digital scan of a physical original does not allow you to have that digital signature. So in my view, it's actually it's less error prone, it's less traceable having a scan of a physical paper rather than just having the digital version. I hope that answered at least some questions. But throughout our experience, both are fine. Also digital scans. Yeah, okay. Brandon, thank you very much for confirming. Yeah, and again, back to Christopher, as you said there, whether it's worthwhile printing all digital certificates into a physical copy. In our experience, that time has passed where a physical copy is needed. I would say we've never seen any auditors expecting a printed out version unless specifically specified in a document control SOP or document control strategy. So I think that there might be reminiscence of auditors still wanting to see a physical copy, but in general, keeping it digital with digital signatures that are compliant to 21 Part 11 is the way to go. And yeah, saving paper. Thank you, Joseph. So
and what about backup, Jakob?
Yeah, of course. I mean, talking about digital records in general would also be something we could talk on for hours, right?
Mm.
But having, of course, that all stands on a basis of a very strong information security strategy or data security strategy, having those backed up and so forth. Of course, that's the equivalent of our old fire safes, being able to insure against fires and have maybe even having copies. But I think in the digital era, that time has really passed.
Nice. And how do we, like, I know you've spent so much time on being part of designing our CFR 21 FDA Part 11 compliance modules in Europe. How do we actually do that?
I think in general and also with our systems, I think it's just really important always to think back to, if you were to do this by hand, would you sign it? I think there's simplicity and genius in the 21 CFR Part 11, because basically everything you change or every digital record you produce should be signed, and in 21 CFR Part 11 that requires you to enter your email and your password or PIN code again and have you digitally sign those things. And I think there's a lot of systems out there that deal with this specifically, but just having that proof that it was actually you as a person performing this action is surely a baseline. Let's see if there's some other great, I don't know if there's other questions.
Yeah, we could keep talking. And Stephen Evans, sorry, I have to go, another meeting starting. Thanks for being here. I think our time is almost up. Wasn't we set to go at
5 o'clock? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, it's been really, really interesting to hear your answers on the polls on this topic that for us is something that Jakob and I are like mostly passionate about in every of our other most interesting topics also that we have been having webinars on. But it's been so interesting to have you guys here to kickstart this topic that we are essentially gonna do a lot of different material on. So thank you very much. I'm super proud. Thank you very much, Jakob.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you very much, Adam, Jakob, and to our great audience. So stay tuned. We are still almost end of the year has almost arrived, but we are still planning great events for you, and we are planning another great event also with you, in December. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in another event where we will share with you additional great tips on how to monetize your temperature mapping for compliance. So thank you very much, and see you at our next events.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye, guys. Okay, sorry.